Valve, the company behind Steam, is at the center of a major new class action lawsuit. The core of this problem, a massive contract dispute. Filed just hours ago, the lawsuit alleges that Valve is breaking its own promises by refusing to pay over $20 million in legal fees for thousands of cases filed against them that could lead to billions of dollars being paid out. In this video, we'll break down the entire story from the confidential slideshow Valve got its hands on to the events that led to this new lawsuit. To understand this, we have to go back to 2012. That's when Valve added something called a mandatory arbitration clause to the Steam subscriber agreement that everyone clicks agree on. Simply put, a mandatory arbitration clause is part of a contract that forces you to settle any disagreements with the company outside of a traditional courtroom. Instead of suing them, you have to go through a private, less formal process called arbitration. This process is often faster and cheaper than a court case. At the time, Gabe Newell even called class action lawsuits a shakedown, and the company said this new system would be faster and better for everyone. Though there are some people who argue against arbitration, calling it unfair, believing that the arbitrators would favor the business. For Valve though, they do it all through the AAA, the American Arbitration Association, which is seen as one of the largest arbitrators in the world, which claims to have protections against any unfairness. It's also important to note that this isn't Valve's only legal battle right now. For example, there is the Publishers vs. Valve antitrust class action lawsuit, which is over Steam's 30% fee. Consumers vs. Valve antitrust class action lawsuit, where they allege Valve is a monopoly and overcharges on games. Valve vs. Rothschild is Valve fighting a patent troll who keeps demanding more money. And another Consumer vs. Valve class action lawsuit, but this one is in the UK rather than the US, which alleges that Valve has overcharged millions of UK gamers. Lately, there's also been the pressure from payment processors behind the scenes like Visa and MasterCard. So over the past few days, I have been keeping tabs to see if anything happens legally with that situation. But that is when I stumbled upon a brand new lawsuit that just got filed a few hours ago called Smith vs. Valve. Now, this situation actually began back in early 2021 when a group of consumers filed an antitrust class action claiming Valve's policies were a monopoly that artificially inflated game prices on Steam. This was completely separate from any of the other lawsuits that we just listed off. Valve responded by pointing to their mandatory arbitration clause that they had in their terms since 2012. They argued that because the consumers had all agreed to it, the lawsuit couldn't proceed. A judge agreed, and the case was sent to arbitration. So after Valve successfully pushed the case into arbitration, they likely expected a handful of individual claims. But multiple law firms saw an opportunity. One specifically recruited over 70,000 customers through different ads like on YouTube, and would just say that if you bought a game on Steam, you were owed money. This led to literally tens of thousands of people signing up with these law firms, not really understanding what they were getting into. This strategy is known as mass arbitration. This is where the story takes a very interesting turn though. During this time, as Valve was being hit with literally thousands of these arbitration claims, they were able to get their hands on a confidential slideshow presentation from an ex-lawyer at one of these law firms involved in the mass arbitration. This slideshow, which was meant to be private, described the arbitration strategy as a business opportunity. It even listed Valve right in the presentation as a target. The firm's strategy, as described in the slideshow, was to use a large number of cases to force Valve to pay huge amounts in fees, hoping this would pressure them into a large settlement rather than actually fighting each case. The goal was to extract millions, if not billions of dollars out of different businesses. They preyed on Valve specifically as a target, seeing as they have a huge user base, citing over 1 billion user accounts, which means they had a huge pool to recruit from, and were able to recruit people from ads for very little money. Valve saw this as a plot to weaponize its own arbitration clause against them, which was originally designed to pay the fees for an average Steam user, not for huge law firms which see this as a business strategy to make money. So, in response, Valve tried to fight back. They filed their own lawsuit against one of the law firms, arguing that this was an abusive legal tactic designed to overwhelm them. However, a court later dismissed Valve's lawsuit, so while Valve saw this as an unfair tactic, they weren't successful in stopping it in the court. It was at this point in September 2024 that Valve updated the Steam subscriber agreement to change its arbitration clause. The new version removed any mention of arbitration, especially the parts where it said that Valve would pay for the fees. As the cases moved forward, the AAA required Valve to pay the initial filing fees that amounted to about $1.8 million. Valve paid for this, no problem. Everything seemed to be going well until the turning point. In March 2025, the AAA sent Valve another invoice, but this time it was for $20.8 million. These fees are called case management fees, which brings us to the main issue of the new lawsuit. Valve has refused to pay this $20 million for multiple months now. The new legal complaint alleges this isn't because Valve can't afford it, as the company is worth billions, but because they are deliberately trying to stop the arbitration process from moving forward. We originally talked about how Valve was refusing to pay the $20 million back in June, after it was confirmed multiple times by Valve lawyers. So this is where the new lawsuit gets introduced. Officially known as Smith vs. Valve, has been filed by plaintiff Jeffrey Smith, who is represented by the law firm Mason LLP, which was one of the main firms responsible for the mass arbitration attack on Valve. The new 17-page complaint details all the events we just talked about and was just filed on August 5th, 2025. The new lawsuit has two main legal claims. First, that Valve is in breach of its own contract by refusing to pay the required fees. And second, Valve's refusal shows bad faith because they force people into this specific legal process and are now preventing it from working. So you might be wondering, what do the plaintiffs want out of all this? Well, it's much more than just the $20 million in fees. The lawsuit is trying to make Valve pay the fees to get the original cases going again. But the main goal is to get extra money from Valve, which is what all the original arbitration claims were also about, hoping to extract as much money as possible from Steam. The $20 million is literally just the tip of the iceberg, as if all 14,000 claims went through the full arbitration process, the final cost to Valve could be so much larger. While it's impossible to give an exact number, the total cost would likely be in the hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars. For example, a similar mass arbitration case found that a company settled for over $146 million, and if we go back to the presentation, they easily explain how they use this to make billions of dollars with this tactic. Now, although at the moment the entire lawsuit is sort of centered around one guy named Jeffrey Smith, the lawsuit actually wants to represent a whole class of people. All Steam subscribers in the United States who filed an antitrust arbitration claim against Valve that they then failed to pay the fees for. This means if your claim is part of the 14,000 plus people that were held up, you may automatically be part of this new lawsuit. Now, this is a brand new case, so we are in the very early stages, as this is the one and only document filed for Smith vs. Valve so far, and Valve will have a chance to file a response. Before this can proceed as a class action, a judge has to certify it, which essentially just means they have to confirm it. On one hand, the plaintiffs have a strong case for certification because their claims are based on clear objective facts, as Valve is refusing to pay the fees. But Valve will fight this hard. They will almost certainly argue that this entire strategy is an abuse of the legal system and that the law firms, not the consumers, are the ones driving the litigation for profit. They'll use the confidential slideshow as key evidence to paint this as a legal shakedown. So it will be up to the courts to decide if this fully proceeds as a class action or not. So what does this all mean for you, the average Steam user? This case is a perfect example of a powerful legal tactic being used to force a company into paying a massive settlement. From Valve's perspective, they're just fighting back against law firms that are trying to weaponize its own arbitration clause. By refusing to pay these fees, Valve is essentially saying, we will not be pressured into a settlement by a legal strategy that is designed to drain our resources, as the law firms see this as an investment opportunity, not an actual effort to help individual consumers. So this legal battle is not just about a contract, it's about whether law firms can use mass arbitration as a business model to extract huge sums of money from companies, and it seems like Valve isn't having any of it. We will have to see how Valve responds, but all signs are pointing to this turning into Valve's fourth class action lawsuit they are fighting against right now.